Welcome to Chapter 2, Lesson 1. So for this chapter, we're going to be doing a boot camp type of learning. So for level 1, this is the private level. This means that we're going to be starting with solving one-step equations. As you can see, there is a YouTube link to a pretty fun video on it's a little rap about how to solve one-step equations. So in this section, our goal is to solve one-step equations in one variable. So at this time, I think it'd be very smart to take out your goal sheet and write this down. Next, we're going to move on to vocab. So our first vocabulary word is equivalent equations. So like before, like in chapter 1, we had equivalent expressions, both very similar, but with this one, we're dealing with equations, and equations, remember, have equal signs. So an equivalent equation is an equation that has the same solution. So an example of this could be 4 plus 2 equals 4 plus 2. A non-example of this would be 4 plus 1 equals 4 plus 2. Our next vocabulary word is inverse operations. An inverse operation is are operations that undo each other. Pretty self-explanatory. If you have any questions, make sure you ask in class. As you can see, both of these have a red star next to them. And just like in the last chapter, that means that you do need to write these vocabulary words down. Remember, you do have vocabulary sheets that have the option for you to write down, not an option, you have to write down the definition, an example, a non-example, and a characteristic or hint. So now we're going to get into the meat of the lesson. So we are going to start off by solving equations by adding and subtracting. So we have two properties here. If I'm being honest, I don't really think I'm going to need you to write these down. But if you want to, go right ahead. So the first one says the addition property of equality. So you're going to be adding the same number to each side of an equation that'll produce an equivalent equation. Next, we have the subtraction property of equality, which is very similar, meaning you're going to subtract the same number from each side of an equation to produce an equivalent equation. So for example, say we have 4 equals 4. And 4 does equal 4. And if we have 4 plus 2 equals 4 plus 2, so we added 2 to both sides. Whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. 4 plus 2 equals 6, and 4 plus 2 equals 6, and 6 does equal 6. It might not be the same as 4 equals 4, but it does equal each other. Similarly, for subtraction, if we have 4 again, this time if we have 4 and we subtract 2 from it, we have to do it to the other side. If 4 minus 2 is 2, 4 minus 2 is 2, and 2 does equal 2. And once again, it might not be 4 equals 4, but 2 does equal 2, meaning that we have solved this and we have equivalent equations. So now to add a little bit more information for you guys, we're going to go through a step-by-step procedure on how to solve these one-step equations. As a reminder, with one-step equations, you definitely are going to need to be showing your work here. You know, I know a lot of you will want to just say, oh, I can figure it out in my head, but the only way that you can make sure that you don't make mistakes is showing your work. So step 1 for your procedures to determine which side the variable is on. And that's the side that you're going to want to start on. So say we have the equation x plus 3 equals 9. So when we're looking at that equation, we can completely see that the x, which is our variable, is on the left-hand side. From here, we're going to go to step 2, which says we're going to eliminate what is not attached to the variable by adding the opposite to both sides. So our variable is x, and our not attached piece would be that positive 3. So in order to get rid of it, we're going to add the opposite. So if we have positive 3, we're going to add a negative 3. And remember, what we do to one side, we always have to do to the other. So we're going to have 9 plus negative 3. Now, how this works is positive 3 plus negative 3, it cancels out. So we are left with just x equals 9 plus negative 3, which is 6. From here, we're going to go to step 3, which says if your variable is by itself on one side of the equation, you are finished. So as you can see, x is by itself. We have x equals 6. No more work we have to do. Pretty plain and simple. Now step 4 is check your answer. I think this is the most important step because most of the time in math it can be very hard to go back and check to make sure you have the right answer. With equations, all you have to do is plug in whatever that variable is or whatever the answer is that you got for that variable right back into the equation and make sure it makes sense. So with our previous one, we have x equals 6, so we can do 6 plus 3 equals 9. 6 plus 3 is 9, and 9 does equal 9. So check it right off. You have solved that equation. So now we're going to go through a few examples. The first example that we have here is h minus 12 equals negative 27. So you want to start off by writing the original equation down. This is going to be the most important part because if you write it down incorrectly, you might end up with the wrong answer. So then you're going to add the opposite. So we had negative 12. So we're going to add positive 12 to that, and we're going to add positive 12 to both sides. So we're going to see that we have h minus 12 plus 12 equals negative 27 plus 12. And when you do that, you're going to have h by itself equals negative 15. From here, we're going to go to the next example, which is k plus 63 equals 92. So once again, you want to make sure you're writing down that original equation so you can make sure you have everything in every component in the right place. From here, you're going to add the opposite. So we have k plus 63, and then we're going to add the opposite, meaning we're going to add a negative 63 to that, which then equals 92 plus negative 63. By doing this operation, we're going to end up with k by itself and the number 29 because 92 plus negative 63 is 29. For both of these problems, you can absolutely go right back in and show your work and prove and check your answer to prove that for the first one, h does equal negative 15. To do that, negative 15 minus 12 equals negative 27. Remember, when you have a negative, it's adding the opposites. You have negative 15 plus negative 12 equals negative 27. And remember, so negative 15, adding another negative 12 to that would equal negative 27, meaning that negative 27 is equal to negative 27. And the same goes over here with k plus 63 equals 92. So start off by plugging the number 29 right back into the equation. 29 plus 63 equals 92. 29 plus 63 does equal 92, and 92 equals 92. And just like that, you've checked both of your answers. Now, we're going to move on to solving equations by multiplying and dividing. Just like before, there are a couple properties. Again, you do not have to write these down unless you want to. The multiplication property of equality is meaning multiplying each side of an equation by the same non-zero number produces an equivalent equation. And then similarly, we have the division property, meaning dividing each side of an equation by the same non-zero number produces an equivalent equation. So say we have x over 4 equals 3. We're going to multiply by the reciprocal, since technically x over 4 would be a fraction. And you're going to do that to both sides. Remember, one-step equations, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So we'll end up with x, because 4 crosses out with 4. You'll have x equals 3 times 4, which is 12. Then, if we were to go down to division, very similarly, say we have 3x, and that equals 15. In order to get that x alone, we're going to have to divide by 3. X equals 15 divided by 3, and 3 goes into 15 5 times. So now we're going to go through the procedure on how to solve multiplying and dividing one-step equations. So the first step is very similar to that of adding and subtracting. You're going to determine which side the variable is on, and you want to start on that side. So again, if we have x over 2 equals 8, we can see clearly that the x variable is on the left-hand side. From here, we're going to eliminate what is attached to the variable. So with this, the division or the quotient of 2 underneath is added to that. So we would multiply each side by 2, and we would get x equals 8 times 2, which is 16. Step 3, when the variable is by itself on one side of the equation, you are finished. And as you see, we have x over here by itself equals 16. And as I said before, check your answers by substituting the value back into the equation. With one-step equations, this is the only time that you're going to be able to do that. And we have a few examples here. So x over 3 equals 5. So we're going to multiply by 3 on both sides, and x equals 15. And then with the other example, we have negative 8x equals 96. And what you're going to do is divide each side by negative 8 to get x alone. And 96 divided by negative 8 is going to be negative 12. From here, you'll see that we have an activity. You can go down, answer the final G question. Again, this is on the same sheet as your goals. And from here, you're going to be able to choose one of the 3 activity options. You have either the maze activity worksheet, or the card game, or the math libs.